Betrayed bride shocks all the guests at her own wedding. What she did in that moment left everyone terrified. The grand hall was decorated like something out of a fairy tale, crystal chandeliers glittering, flower arrangements cascading from the ceiling, and an air of pure elegance that left the 400 guests in awe. The wedding had been nothing short of a dream, with the bride looking absolutely breathtaking in her intricate lace gown and the groom standing proudly by her side. Everyone believed they were witnessing the beginning of a perfect love story, but little did they know the bride had something planned that would shake the entire evening and their hearts to the core. As the champagne glasses clinked and laughter filled the room, the bride gracefully stood up, a radiant smile on her face. She walked to the stage, picking up the microphone with a steady hand. The guests fell silent, expecting a heartfelt speech, perhaps a romantic declaration of love for her new husband. She began by thanking everyone for attending, expressing gratitude for those who had traveled great distances to be there. She then turned her attention to her father-in-law, thanking him for the lavish celebration. Her words were poised, her tone warm. The guests watched with admiration. Then, with a glimmer in her eyes, she announced that she had a special surprise, a gift from her to each and every one of them. Excitement buzzed through the room. What could it be? She instructed the guests to check under their chairs. Attached to each one was a white envelope. Whispers and giggles filled the air as people eagerly tore them open, expecting a sweet note, maybe a lottery ticket, or a small keepsake from the wedding. But as the contents were revealed, gasps spread like wildfire. The room, once filled with joyous chatter, now buzzed with horror and confusion. Inside each envelope was a photograph, shocking, undeniable proof of the groom's betrayal. Pictures of him in intimate moments with another woman. Some were taken in hotels, others in places the guests recognized. And worst of all, they weren't recent, they dated back months, even years. The groom's face drained of color. He staggered back, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. His family sat frozen in their seats, their faces turning pale with humiliation. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause, slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause, slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause, slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause, slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. The bride, now standing tall, held her head high. "I didn't find out yesterday. I've known for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "But I wanted him to feel what I felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. And now, I want you all to know who he truly is before I walk away forever." A stunned silence followed. Then the whispers began, followed by murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage, and finally, applause slow at first, then growing into a roaring wave of support. "You absolute disgrace," his father spat. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I poured millions into this wedding. Our companies were supposed to merge. This was supposed to secure our future. And now, thanks to you, we're a laughingstock." The guests watched in stunned silence. Jessica, tears streaming down her face, threw her drink at the groom. Champagne dripped from his expensive suit as he stood there, humiliated beyond measure. And then, to make things even worse, a woman's voice rang out from the other side of the room. "Wait a damn minute." Heads turned. Another woman, brunette, strikingly beautiful, standing near the bar, held up her own envelope, shaking it with a smirk. "Jessica, sweetheart," she said, taking a step forward, "you thought you were the only one?" Jessica's jaw dropped, the groom's face drained of all remaining color. "I've been seeing him for over a year," the brunette continued, now fully enjoying the chaos. "Guess what? He told me you didn't mean anything to him. And now that I think about it," she turned, scanning the room. "Ladies, how many of you have been with our dear groom here?" A slow, awkward silence filled the air. Then one hand went up, then another and another. One by one, women in the crowd lifted their hands, each revealing their own betrayal. The guests were now on their feet, whispering in utter disbelief. The groom looked around, his body shaking. He had been caught completely, publicly, and undeniably. He turned to his father, pleading, "Dad, please." But his father had already made up his mind. He pulled out his phone and, in front of everyone, dialed a number. "Call off the merger," he barked into the phone. "Cancel the contracts. My son has just ruined everything." The groom staggered backward. His life, his future, his carefully built web of lies, it was all crumbling before his eyes. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, the grand doors swung open. And the bride, now dressed in a sleek, all-white suit, walked back in. She was no longer the heartbroken, betrayed woman. She was a force of nature. She strode right up to the stage, grabbed a flute of champagne, and raised it. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice confident and strong. The guest erupted into applause and cheers. The groom? He was left standing in the ruins of his own destruction, and the bride? She walked out of that wedding, head held high, stepping into a future far brighter than anything she could have ever had with him. As the bride walked out of the venue, basking in the glory of her ultimate revenge, the guests still murmured in shock. The groom stood frozen in place, drenched in champagne, humiliated beyond belief. His father had publicly disowned him, the business merger had collapsed, and his mistresses had turned against him. But as he wiped his face, his eyes darkened with something new rage. The guests were still laughing, whispering, and gossiping. He clenched his fists. No, this wasn't over. She wouldn't get away with this. The bride, now free from her toxic past, was thriving. Her story had gone viral. Videos of her speech, the guests' reactions, and the groom's downfall had spread across social media like wildfire. People from around the world called her the wedding avenger. Women flooded her inbox, praising her strength. Brands reached out for sponsorship deals. Even talk shows invited her for interviews, and the best part, she had walked away with more than just her dignity. She had evidence. The night before the wedding, after confirming her groom's affairs, she had quietly hired a lawyer. Since they had signed a prenuptial agreement that included an infidelity clause, she was now entitled to a massive financial settlement. So while the groom was struggling with the collapse of his father's company, she was out shopping for a new penthouse. Everything was perfect until the threats started. It started with blocked calls, silent voicemails. Then strange cars parked outside her building. Her lawyer warned her, "Your ex is furious. His life is in shambles and he's blaming you for everything. Be careful," but she wasn't afraid. One night, as she was leaving a restaurant, she noticed a man following her. She turned a corner, waiting in the shadows. As he passed, she grabbed his collar and shoved him against the wall. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man hesitated. Her grip tightened. "Who sent you?" The man swallowed hard. "Your ex. He paid me to follow you. He wants dirt on you. Anything to ruin your reputation like you ruined his," she smirked. "Oh, sweetheart, you have no idea who you're messing with." She let him go and walked away. It was time for her final move. The next morning, the groom woke up to a horrific sight, his name all over the news again. But this time, it wasn't just about the wedding scandal. His dirty business deals had been exposed. The mistresses he had abandoned had come forward, revealing the hush money he had paid them. Employees from his father's company leaked documents of fraud. The IRS was now investigating him. And the person who sent all that evidence to the media, the bride, she had spent weeks collecting every piece of dirt on him, every illegal deal, every shady transaction. And she had just ruined him beyond repair. As he sat in his now empty penthouse, his phone rang. It was his father. "You're done, son," his father said coldly. "You're on your own." The call ended. He threw his phone against the wall, breathing heavily. His empire, his life was gone, and she had one. Sitting on the balcony of her new penthouse, the bride sipped a glass of wine, watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this," she chuckled, shaking her head. She typed back, "Oh, I already don't." Then she blocked the number, and with that, she leaned back, exhaled deeply, and smiled. Because for the first time in years, she was finally, truly free. The end.